Hello and welcome
Hey.
to D&D in a Castle DM Deep Dive with a dungeon master who's coming to D&D in a Castle for the first time. We're very, very excited to have at our castle and to have here on the screen with us, Mr. Jim Zub.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's I'm all fresh and new when it comes to D&D in a castle, but I am a longtime D&D guy and I am super pumped for this. This is the craziest, most awesome thing and I cannot wait to be on site with you and the rest of the crew. It's going to be a ton of fun.
It is going to be a ton of fun. We have a lot of cool stuff planned. And I'm going to start by asking about what you have planned for your 6 players for your campaign
Sure.
that you'll be running for 4 days at D&D in a Castle.
Yeah. So, well, a little bit of backstory, I think, first as well. So, if people don't know, I guess a lot of people know, but I've been associated with D&D for since the launch of 5th edition. But I've been playing D&D since 1st edition, back in the early 80s. Once my older brother, who was my original DM, went off to school. I became one of those forever DMs. I was always running games for my friends and all that stuff. But obviously, this is on a whole other level on site in a cool castle. I'm really,
You
really
know,
pumped.
I feel like every forever DM, there's an older brother in the story. There's always, I'm
Yes,
picking this
always.
up, interviewing all these dungeon masters. I'm like, there's
Yeah,
always an older brother, whether it's your older brother or like the
yeah,
neighbor kid had an older
totally,
brother. There's
totally.
always an 11-year-old with a, somebody's got an older brother.
I mean, that's what was amazing about it is there's a real sense of kind of legacy to it. You hand off to the next generation of players or DMs or what may have you. I think that's what's so cool about streaming and, YouTube and Twitch and all that stuff is that it has kind of broken the directness of that now people can learn from all kinds of different sources and see all kinds of different games. Because if you had a bad, D&D experience with your first one, you might think, oh, this game is not for me. And then what you don't realize is every dungeon master's got their own style. Everyone's got their own way of playing. Some are more strategic, some are more, kind of theatrical, and everything in between. You're adjusting the dial kind of in real time, depending on the game itself or how the group is
Mhm.
responding. And so I didn't even fully appreciate that until I'd had the chance to play in, a dozen different games with a dozen different groups of players. But now you can have those experiences just watching online and sort of getting ingratiated and into the mode with that sort of stuff. And so bringing this back to the castle thing, I think what I'm excited about is to meet these players. It's like, a convention game on steroids because we're going to be playing it over multiple days, like 8 hours a day potentially. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that I used to do when I was in like middle school or high school. We would go to one of my buddies' places on a Friday night and we would literally have dinner, usually order in, or they would make, dinner. And then we would just game. We would just game into the evening. We would game until our eyes couldn't stay open anymore, get into sleeping bags, crash in the basement, wake up the next morning, have breakfast, and then game again, And I haven't had that kind of an experience probably since college. You know what I mean? We would do it a couple times, but even then you have way more responsibilities. I think what's cool about this is that ability to just sort of push away the outside world and go, no, we are doing this. We're doing this so hardcore. It's going to be amazing. I'm super
That's so
pumped.
much fun because that's essentially the backstory of D&D in a Castle. So you're an excellent company. This company was
Yeah.
founded by myself and my brother. He's the D&D and I'm the castle. That's kind of how we divide and conquer.
Amazing.
And he was the 11-year-old boy with a friend from down the road whose older brother was a dungeon master, and had the crew, and they played all through day and night as well. And it was reunioning sort of 20 years later that really triggered this idea, like, this is so special and so valuable and
Yeah.
such an important cathartic, like, you can't pay for that kind of therapy, like just pure joy and all the things. Like, how do we get people to
Well, and
commit the time?
you do these convention games and you'll get that sparkle for a couple
Yeah.
hours. You're spending time with people and you're like, man, I wish we could do this all the time. I wish we could do it like we used to, and then this is
Yeah.
just supercharged, being on site and having that extra enthusiasm. I think the other groups and the other dungeon masters and all kind of feeding off each other's energy, this is the impression that I'm getting of it. But what's amazing is I haven't done it yet. So I was joking with you that we need to do a before and after. We're like, this is the plan. And then, of course, no plan survives contact with the enemy. So the minute we actually get through it, at the end of it, I'm going to have this just like, oh my God, what? Here's what I thought versus here's what it was, and here's where it was even better. That's what I'm kind of. It's going to be fascinating to be on the other side of it and kind of go, I am changed. I am different, as a DM or whatever. Just that collaborative kind of process. So I've actually been running several convention games this year. Obviously, it's the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
So I put together this kind of old school dungeon crawl that I ran at a few different cons, and it's been received really, really well. And that got really, the bug kind of bit me like, okay, I love some of these old school aspects of it. And how can I meld as many of those with kind of what we think of as modern Dungeons and Dragons, that we can take the strengths of the old and the strengths of the new and kind of bring them together. I like the delving in the dark and going into these hidden and mysterious places, but then giving it a much more kind of pronounced story and pushing it into all these unexpected kind of role play opportunities, and more than just we're going from room to room and we're going to get the treasure and we're going to push on. I love that stuff too, but how can we make it as integrated and involved, as character centric and unexpected, instead of just filling in the graph paper? What can we do to make every single one of those encounters feel like this place is alive? And having this group of players that's super invested in it and being able to play it over this longer span, I'm just going to throw all kinds of fun stuff at them. And then I've left myself a bunch of opportunities to sort of see where they get most excited and lean into those aspects as much as I can, because that's such a huge part of it. It's not just, I'm not here to drag you through a story. I'm here to discover, a story through play. I'm here to discover a sequence of events and those characters as well, through as we play. That's where the joy of it really comes from for me.
So you've been meeting with or connecting with your players in
Yeah.
anticipation of the upcoming castles. And just to clarify, you're at the events. Actually, you're going to be at kind of 3 events, even though
Yeah.
you're dungeon master at 1.
That's right.
But for November 4th to 8, you have 6 players at your table. So your
Right.
table is full, and you've been connecting with them online. How are they shaping up? What do you think it's gonna look like?
They're good. I mean, what's fascinating is they don't know each other either. So there's this kind of interesting interplay back and forth as some of them are trying to get a handle on what kind of character would work best with the party balance, or they're making 5th level characters. I know some DMs like B Dave, they go like heavy, crazy power.
Straight to level 20, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I got to ease myself in a little more than that. So we're gonna do level 5. They've got a goodly amount of stuff. I've given them, I think the only limitation that I gave them in terms of character build, I told them to use a standard array because I wanted to have a base point in terms of rather than random rolls. And I asked them if they could not have flight, because that would mess with, flight is such a potent and crazy kind of game shattering element in terms of combat and in terms of encounters. And so I'm just like, just to start, like if we introduce some of those elements maybe later in the adventure, but I want to be able to ramp up to it, if any. But that was it. I wanted them to be able to pick, their species and pick their class and integrate. They've got a couple magic items, and so I can see them. You can see the gears kind of turning in terms of whether or not they min-max this stuff or if they want something really kooky instead. And that's great. That's the whole point of this thing, is them trying to discover. But I also want to encourage them not to, I don't need a 3-page backstory. Just give me a few little high points and I'll incorporate those into the
They
adventure
will write you a 3-page backstory.
Oh, I know. And that's cool. I love it. And I'm happy to incorporate that stuff into the mix. But I don't want them to like try and trap the character in amber, because so much of it does come out of interaction, and it comes out of rolling the dice and interacting with each other. When you suddenly realize the role that you thought you were going to have in this party is now so different because of what other people need, and those natural kind of rhythms that pop up at the table. So you can always encourage people, but I love their enthusiasm. I love their excitement. I love that they're thinking about it and they're invested in it the way I'm invested in it. That's what you want at the table, obviously.
Yeah. Do you have a sense yet of like, if they're new to D&D, if this is sort of a bucket list thing, or
You know, that's
what their
interesting.
sort of
What do
relationship
you
is.
what do you find? I don't think that they're new to D&D. They seem to be
Okay.
asking very specific questions in terms of skill sets and powers and abilities and things like that. Do you find you get brand new players? I
We
mean,
have
that
had brand
that
new
has got to
players.
be one hell of a first experience at the
Heck, you know,
table.
we like to say we're here to break D&D, and you'll play
Wow,
D&D here, and then you'll be
sure.
like, wait a minute, where's the
Because this
castle? Where's
doesn't,
3 days? Where's
yeah,
my dungeon master who's amazing, and all my other super committed players? But you know, we
right.
had one guy who came and he had said he had read all the books, but he had never had the opportunity to play. So he
Wow.
went,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh, that
yeah,
would be just such a wild. I mean, I guess so. One of my first comic conventions I ever did was San Diego Comic-Con, which is considered one of the biggest in the world. And so, you know, I mean, that is a heck of a hazing ritual for you to go through at the top end to go as crazy and big as possible. But hey,
yeah.
man, that works. That has got to be cool. No, I did. So to answer your question, I don't get the impression that I'm going to be having to explain core terms or things like that. If anything, I'm not afraid, but I'm sort of like I'm curious what sort of combinations. I've got to look over spell lists pretty carefully to make sure I know what they're putting together, so that there isn't something that's going to really catch me off guard at the table. But there's always something that'll catch me off guard. It's all a vain hope that you're going to have complete control, but you never do. That's kind of the joy of being a dungeon master, you know.
Yeah, so true. As a dungeon master, how long have you been running games, been
Sure.
running D&D? Like,
Oh man, like we're talking like grade 6, grade 7, right? I've been playing since the early 80s. Um, you know, like the same era as the Stranger Things kids, which is one of the reasons why I wrote on the Stranger Things D&D graphic novel that shows the kids getting their first D&D set. That stuff's all contemporary to me. That was the D&D
yeah.
that I was playing. Probably one of my most proud moments was when I was writing the script. I had the kids referencing some rules from, you know, a first edition D&D, and Wizards sent some notes back and they thought I'd made a mistake. And then I showed them line and verse in the book, and they were like, "Never mind, leave it
Never
alone."
mind.
That's
Go
right. And I'm not even a rules lawyer at the table, really, but I was very proud in that moment that I was correct. Um, so yeah, I've been playing for a long. I'm in my late 40s, and I've been running games since my teenage years. So every edition of D&D has passed over my table at some point or another. I have a really extensive Dungeons and Dragons collection that I just started to, my older brother was my DM, and so he had a lot of the books. So once I got, like a career in the nerdly arts, I started to indulge and get copies of all that stuff for myself. So just off camera here, the bookshelf that's sort of just to my right is just loaded with first edition, second edition, third edition, fourth, fifth stuff. I've got boxes. I have every first edition module in boxes over there in order by, the letter and number. So yeah, you need like A4. I'll just go over and pull it out and everything else. It's pretty terrifying. I think I have 5 copies of I6 Ravenloft, because I would acquire them over the years, and it's probably my favorite module. So I would always just grab it when I saw it somewhere or saw it used or for a good price, or I would get it as a gift. I started doing Gen Con, and after a few years, I have a booth there every year with Howard Taylor, the amazing cartoonist, and Tracy Hickman, the co-creator of Ravenloft and Dragonlance, which if you would have told my 10-year-old self that, I mean, that's just the most mind-bending, crazy thing ever. So yeah, it's great. I love all this stuff, and I've been deeply integrated into it for a long time. But it's weird, even though I've gathered all this stuff, I'm not a continuity guy in the sense of like, I need everything to be filtered through what it already exists. I do still love homebrewing. I do still love surprising my players as much as possible. I don't want them to just, have the equations going and be like, okay, it's a
Okay,
troll.
here's this
Okay,
and the stab walk, and
yeah,
yeah.
get out the fire. Let's go. Like all that stuff is wonderful and inspirational. But, the game at the table is what really, really matters. Earlier this year, I was kicking the tires on first edition D&D again because I was going to be running this dungeon delve at a couple conventions. And so we went through, Cult of the Lizard God, and I thought I remembered that module, and then I reread it and I went, oh man, this is way different than what I remember. But I just started on the fly incorporating all sorts of improv and fun things that the players were asking. And so that base of material was still really valuable, and the maps and the dungeons and all that stuff. But it all fell away. It wasn't about, counting squares, and it wasn't about attacks
Right.
of opportunity. It was like, how can we make this theatrical and exciting and fun? That's the stuff you're going to remember. A natural 20 is exciting because it represents this heightened explosion of action, but it's not just the roll, it's everything in and around it.
Right.
It's all the things leading up to it, or in some cases the chaos that brings it about.
Yeah. As a dungeon master, what for you makes a great game of D&D? So like, if you look back in gaming, like, oh, that was a
Right.
great game. What about it was great?
Sure.
Like the
That's a good
laughter, the
question.
friendship,
Oh,
the
totally.
drama.
The bonds that you have, the fun in jokes, I think that crop up, that the sequence of events, they're almost like a Rube Goldberg machine, where because this one thing happened, this other thing went off that set off this other thing that exploded in an unexpected way. And none of it you could have planned for, but now that it's happened, you wouldn't have wanted it to go any other way. Do you know? The fun nicknames and the kooky stuff that comes out of it, that after we leave the table, I have a bond with those people, and we have a funny story to tell. And it may not even make sense to other people, but that's not the point. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
our little crew, and we did that thing. And man, that was a good time, and that doesn't mean that you were even successful in the task. I find there's something hilarious about
About failure.
characters on the run, on tragedy, on, we tucked our tail and ran from crazy threat and figured out another way through. Like, those are the things that make the game so memorable. That it is a lot of the fiction that I write, and I've written the official D&D comic. I wrote it for, almost 10 years, written all sorts of sword and sorcery stories and stuff like that professionally, Rick and Morty D&D and those kinds of things. And I find a lot of joy in the unexpected, the sense that the characters are on their back feet and that they're in deep trouble and they don't know what's going to happen next. Being crazy powerful or the heroes of destiny, that may sound like a fantasy story, but to me, that's not the stuff that I really gravitate to. The reason why, like, I write Conan the Barbarian, and the cliche of Conan as this big, unstoppable, tough guy is not real when you look at the source material. He's constantly getting his butt kicked. He's constantly on his back feet. He's constantly in situations where he doesn't know the greater wheels that are turning around him, and he's just trying to survive. And by doing so, he becomes important. He's at the center of the conflict, and inadvertently he breaks evil's plans. But he wasn't the destined one. He isn't the prophesied one, or whatever may have you. He's the other guy. He's just the one that stuck around and survived. And I find something really enjoyable about that. So what I'm trying to say is, if any of my players have like they are the chosen one as part of their character, they're
You might
in
break
for a
that.
rude they're in for a rude awakening. That's all.
And you've mentioned some of the books that you've worked on. So I was just going to say that, you're coming as a dungeon master, but I think your biggest reputation is as a comic
As a
book
writer.
creator. For those who don't know,
I've
your bio,
written
Jim
hundreds of
Zub is
comics.
a
I've
massive
written
comic book writer.
over 70 graphic novels. So everything from Dungeons and Dragons, superhero comics like the Avengers and Black Panther and Iron Man. My own creator-owned series, Skull Kickers, is actually what kind of broke me big I mean, it wasn't even a big hit on its own, but it really proved to people that I could write a fun kind of action story, and it got me on the radar for a bunch of people. And it's funny because to a lot of people, when I was selling Skull Kickers, I would say Skull Kickers is like sort of like Deadpool meets Dungeons and Dragons, or like Conan the Barbarian, but like everything's gone berserk. And now I, officially work on Dungeons and Dragons and Conan the Barbarian, which is the most ridiculous, unbelievable thing I could imagine. So I'm known for comics, but I've done other writing as well. I was a creative consultant on Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus, that source book. I also, my wife and I do a series of books called the Dungeons and Dragons Young Adventurers Guides. And those were supposed to originally be a 3-book series to introduce young players to the precepts of role-playing games and D&D. And we're currently working on book 9 and 10. So clearly they're doing very well, and they're sold all over the place. And we've heard that players really find them useful, or dungeon masters find them really useful for bringing in all kinds of new players, whether or not they're
I was
kids.
going to say, I imagine that to be true. There's like a lot of people, I mean, I write novels as well, and people love young adult fiction, you know,
Mhm.
even though they're adults. The things, sometimes when you cater it for a younger audience, it's so palatable, it's so digestible,
Well, and it's very
even by
direct.
adult friendly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the key. So what we did is we stripped away all the numbers and the specific rules, and what we talk most about are kind of narrative and options. Because to someone new sitting down at the table, I don't think it's about, hey, you've got to optimize these attributes and these skill bonuses. It's like, I want you invested in the idea that you have all the choices at your disposal and that you're an integral part of this thing that we're building together, you know? And so what I want you to know is what your choices are. Here are the different character classes. Here are the species. Here are the abilities that you'll be able to pick from and how they work thematically. I don't need you to worry about numbers crunching or optimization. I just want you to be excited about what your character could be and figure out a personality and a vision for that thing. And then we will tell you what to roll at this table, and, you know, higher numbers better and all that kind of stuff. And so these books are very much built in that mold. They've got this nice trim size for kids. They've got a great price point, and they're essentially, look, here's all the things you get to pick from. Here's bits and pieces of advice. One of the spreads I'm really proud of is we have this flow chart where literally a kid or anyone can answer like 3 questions and they get funneled towards different types of characters. So rather than worrying about, oh my God, I have all these options, just go, are you more of this or this? Well, then you have these kinds of choices and then these ones. And so we can give you the choices, but you still get to narrow your focus in a way that feels very logical and exciting. And you feel like you have your hand on the steering wheel to make the kind of character you want. The monster book that we put together for the Young Adventurers Guides is very much in the same mold. We talk about whether creatures are tougher or weaker, but what we also talk about is a lot of strategic stuff in terms of, hey, these kinds of creatures are found in these areas. So we organize the actual monster book by where you can find them, so that you know, you think about, oh, if we're in the caves, all these creatures might be found in caves or in swamps or in forests. Because for a kid or for someone new to gaming, just looking at something in alphabetical order, you know, feels like a textbook. It feels like I'm supposed to know some of this stuff already. And for us, we wanted it to feel very natural and narrative. And so that's very much in the mold of what we try and do with those books. And they've been really, really successful. They're in like 5 languages. We get fan mail from kids in, you know, France and Italy and Portugal, and they tell us about their D&D characters, and they tell us about all the places they've gone. And it's the best feeling in the world. I feel like it's really kind of come full circle when I was that age, and now being able to bring that to other people feels really extra
every
special.
11-year-old who's learning to DM is bringing in all their friends and their friends' little siblings, and
that's what's great about tabletop gaming. Like, it's the shared experience. And it's not just something passive, and it's not just like collecting. Like, it's not, you know, it's about, we're going to do this thing and come on over and we're going to make memories together. And that's what's so, I think, so cool about the castle is it's just like this big memory making machine that we're going to be in this really unique locale, and we're going to be surrounded by all this talent and feeding on that energy. You know, that's what I'm most excited to kind of partake in,
and also feeding on a lot of snacks. Just like
and
you
also,
want to wear your comfortable pants with the elastic waist because there's a lot of snacks.
Is there? Okay. See, I don't know. It's weird. I'm like seeing all this footage and I'm asking all these questions, and I'm nervous in that excitement, you know, like any kind of trip. You're excited to get there and to get integrated and get, you know, get your sea legs or whatever equivalent, you know, in terms of location and people. But what's great is I know a bunch of the other DMs. Like, I've gamed with B Dave and Mark Meir before, you know, I've met a bunch of the people that are there. And so in some ways it's like a whole new experience, but in other ways it's like, man, it took you so long. Why haven't you been here ages ago, you know? And that's very much, it feels very welcoming in that sense, that they consider me just like, just one of the gang, which is very sweet, honestly. Yeah.
It's a lovely community. It's a lovely community of guests and a lovely community of really supportive and friendly dungeon masters too, that all have this vision of this super glowy community, and it's really
Yeah.
lovely.
And
I
then
do want,
you guys asked me to do a Halloween one shot,
yeah, I was
which
just
I'm
gonna ask
also
you
going
this.
to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So because I'm going to be there a couple days before the full blown November game, the chance to be at the castle for Halloween was too alluring, and so I really really wanted to be there for the Halloween festivities. And you asked me if I could put together a Halloween one shot game. And so I don't want to reveal the secrets of that, but it is going to be a blast. It's called Pumpkin Panic. It's going to be ridiculous. I don't want to reveal anything, but I was pitching a bunch of the high kind of concepts to my wife, and she was giggling just as I was explaining it to her, and she could already see the potential within like 3 or 4 sentences. She was like, "Oh, that's
I
just going
see
to
it.
be ridiculous." I'm like, "Exactly." That's the
That's
whole
so
point.
great. The
Yeah.
Halloween is going to be so much fun. It's our last gaming day. We've got, well, Mark Mears also, you mentioned, he's doing a pumpkin-y kind of fall. He always carves like a dozen pumpkins and has them in
Amazing.
his room. I think he just really likes carving pumpkins. I don't know.
Hey, that's great.
But, but this is the October 28th to November 1st round. So guests of either of the fall rounds will get to meet you or be at the castle when you're there. And at that round, they'll have a chance to play in your one shot potentially. I might have to like sit in the corner and watch that one shot because I think that's
It's
going to
going to
be a
be a
lot of
good
fun.
time. Yeah,
And
it's
then
going to be a lot of fun.
you're also going to be present for the days in between the rounds. So there's 2 full
Mhm.
days, 3 nights between the rounds as well, where we're running a little fun in there of having like workshops and talks and Q&As and things with our dungeon masters to allow our guests. It's only open to guests of D&D in a Castle of either round to get to meet with and interact with and learn from and just enjoy the company of our dungeon masters and other guests for a little longer because it goes so fast. It goes so quickly.
Yeah,
It's
I
remarkable how
got.
quickly it goes. And I was like, what? I have to go back to
Yeah,
reality?
and
What is
obviously I've got my crew that's going to be at my table for the extended adventure, but I'm really looking forward to meeting other people as well and chatting about storytelling and dungeon mastering and just all kinds of different stuff, and laughing and interacting, playing some other games, and just being in the moment, being there and knowing that all I have to think about for the next few days is having a really good time and bringing as much kind of bombast and energy to the table as possible.
I think it's going to be an amazing game and an amazing 2 weeks at the castle or week that you're going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite you, Jim, to address our
Mhm.
audience and invite them to come and
Sure.
hang out with you at D&D in the castle. And then we're going to take it out with an outro video. And if anybody would like to learn more about Jim, about D&D in a castle, about castle days, there is a link in the corner to one of our upcoming fall rounds where Jim will be offering his Halloween flavored one shot. And
Yeah.
we also have a live chat there on the website that is not a bot, it's a human who will talk to you if you have questions about this experience. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Jim, to invite people to come and join you at D&D in a Castle and hang out this fall.
Sure. So if you have ever wanted a pure gaming experience, remove all the distractions of the world, focus on the fiction and the fantasy, I don't think you can get a better experience than taking yourself to D&D in a Castle. You're going to be on site, constantly inspired by some of the most amazing creators in tabletop gaming. We're going to be just giving you the best we can at the table every single day. Your meals are all going to be set up for you. There's tons of entertainment and activities that you can enjoy, and you get to hang with me and a crew of wonderful, wonderful creators in Northern England, for crying out loud, playing the purest, wildest D&D imaginable. And if that sounds like a good time to you, then make sure you check out D&D in a Castle, because I could not be more excited.
Awesome. Well, we're very excited to see you there, Jim, and I hope we see some of you watching today at the castle in November, and that we get to meet soon. Take care, everyone.